Ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues and friends, welcome to our workshop entitled Tidying Up Messy Data, which will be presented by Dr. Bruno from Canada. I will moderate this opening session as well. My name is Sage, Statistical and Data Analysis Engineer. Currently, I'm working as machine learning researcher in research laboratory in France, and I published recently two interesting research papers related to machine learning field in well-known conferences and international journals. Besides, I'm IEEE student members and an active member in Our Ladies Tunis. I'm so delighted to see all of you here, eager to discover and learn new things related to our programming language. Let me introduce our professional speaker, Dr. Bruno Grande. Dr. Bruno is a postdoctoral researcher in biomedical data science, specialized mainly in computational biology and cancer genomics. He is interested in all things related to data, from collecting, cleaning, analyzing, visualizing, and dissemination of data. Dr. Bruno has also many awards and honors with solid academic background in R programming and bioinformatics. So before beginning the presentation, let me share with you via this video our Our Ladies Tunis team. So I share my screen. Okay. Can you see my screen, please?
Yes.
All right.
Hello and welcome to this workshop session. Before starting the workshop, we'll introduce you to the Our Ladies Global and Our Ladies Tunis initiative. The R community suffers from an underrepresentation of minority genders in every role and area of participation, whether as leaders, package developers, conference speakers, conference participants, educators, or users. As a diversity initiative, the mission of Our Ladies is to achieve proportionate representation by encouraging, inspiring, and empowering people of genders currently underrepresented in the R community and to facilitate individual and collective progress worldwide. Gabriela de Caros founded Our Ladies on October 1, 2012. Our Ladies Global was born and the grant was awarded in September 2016. Since then Our Ladies has grown to 170 chapters in 44 countries and 39,000 members. Our Ladies Tunis is part of Our Ladies Initiative and was created in May 2020 by women working as data scientists and biostatisticians and bioinformaticians. Our goal is to create an R community in Tunis and empower underrepresented genders in the R community. This is the core team of Our Ladies Tunis. Come and join our community on social media. This presentation was made with R Markdown. Thank you for watching this video and enjoy our workshop.
All right. Okay. Now let me ask our audience one question, please, related to our today's topic. And of course, everyone can answer it in the chat. The question is, according to you, how much time in percentage will a data science data analyst provide to tidying data during a project process? I repeat the question. According to you, how much time in percentage will a data science or data engineer provide to tidying data during a project process? So leave your answer in the chat and I will give you the answer later on. So now Dr. Bruno, the floor is yours and you can begin sharing and presenting, please. Thank you so much again for being here and for accepting our invitation.
Thank you very much for the intro, and I'm curious to see what people will post in the chat in response to that question. I think it's an important thing to acknowledge. All right, let's see how this is. I'm going to just set up my screen so that I can see everyone if ever they do have their videos on. Okay. All right, so everyone sees my screen at the moment, I believe.
Yes, it's okay.
Thank you. All right, so I'm starting to look at some of the percentages. Some people are not data scientists yet. Hopefully you'll get one step closer after today's workshop. Those of you who have no idea, that's totally normal. I had no idea when I started getting into this. And the answer may be surprising to some of you. Okay. So in my mind, I don't know. So I'll see what other people are posting. I'm seeing 40 to 60%, 75%, 60%.
Yes.
What would be your guess for the among the organizers who can speak at the moment?
Yeah. Let's see participants' answers, and later on we will publish the answer in the chat. Okay.
So I guess first I'll start with introducing myself. So my name, as it was in the introduction, is Bruno Grande. I relatively recently completed my PhD. Just over a year ago, I defended it in Simon Fraser University in Vancouver, Canada. I'm originally from Montreal, though, in Canada. And so some of you might have heard, but I'll be giving this workshop in English. But if ever some of you want to ask questions, feel free to post them if you're more comfortable in French in a chat. I'm able to understand, read French. My French is a bit rusty, so I'll still answer you in English. But if ever that's something you're more comfortable asking or formulating your questions in, feel free to do so. And I do want to kind of preface this workshop with the kind of what has been shown in the video that was just played is that this workshop, first of all, is created for beginners in mind. And so I want this to be as inclusive as possible. Any questions is fair game. And so feel free to ask any questions in the chat. And we have some people who are going to be monitoring the chat. And I'm also going to be maybe taking pause sometimes to answer those questions if ever they come up. So please feel free to ask any questions. This workshop was created for everyone in mind. And we're all in this together. And again, I want to reiterate the mission here to empower gender minorities. And so I'm happy to be giving this workshop and helping you. And if ever you have any questions, I will be happy to help you after the workshop if ever anything comes up within, obviously, within reason. So as I mentioned, I got my PhD, and currently I'm in Seattle, Washington, as a bioinformatics engineer at Sage Bionetworks. And very briefly, Sage Bionetworks is a nonprofit that takes care of essentially managing data, often as part of large projects, to essentially maximize that data being used. And so a huge part of our mission is to promote open science, because we believe that human health is really complicated and it's best tackled as a global community. And so when data only stays at a single lab, that data is not going to be fully taken advantage of. And so at Sage, what we're trying to do is promote data sharing, responsible data sharing, to ensure that as many people look at the data as possible. And because human health research is going to only be faster if we just work together on addressing the challenges that we face today. So that's just kind of a quick what my mission is at Sage Bionetworks. And part of what we do is making sure that the science, the research that we do is open and reproducible. And a big part of that is ensuring that data is tidy. So I also want to acknowledge the Our Ladies Tunis team who will be who are on this call, who will be helping me out, who organized this workshop. And so I would like to thank you for inviting me to give this workshop, but also who will be helping out, looking at the chat and addressing questions if you have any. And so finish with this little image here. And you'll notice that I have a lot of these cartoons throughout my workshop. These are all made by a person who's active in the R community called Allison Horst. I have her link to her Twitter page in the acknowledgements on this tutorial. But the images are kind of there just to make this tutorial much more colorful, because otherwise it would be a lot of black and white, and that's kind of boring. So let's just start with getting ourselves on the same page, because some of you, the idea of tidying data might be quite new. And tidy data can maybe mean different things to different people. So I think we should just take a moment to just make sure we're all on the same page. And yeah, I noticed that for those of you who recently joined us, someone just posted the link to this workshop. If you want to see this page, you're going to want to also open up that link, the Shiny Apps link, and that's going to open what you currently see on my screen. And actually, this is a hands-on workshop, so you're going to actually be doing coding alongside me at certain parts. So what is tidy data? And so here we have a very kind of academic definition here at the top, which is taken from this journal publication written by Hadley Wickham. For those of you who don't know, Hadley Wickham is the chief scientific officer, I think, at RStudio. He's the primary author of ggplot2, tidyr, dplyr, a lot of which the tools we're going to use today. And so he knows a thing or two about data science. And so for him, according to him, the definition of tidy data is that it's a standard way of mapping the meaning of a data set to structure. That's a bit academic, a bit too academic for me. I would like to put in more practical terms. In essence, tidy data, each variable is a column, each observation is a row, and each cell has a single measurement. And so here we have a very, very simple example of this table where we have these three columns, ID, name, and color. Let me just zoom in a bit more. We have ID, name, and column, and then you have each row as an observation. This would be considered a tidy data. But in many cases, data is not given to us in a very tidy format. And that's when us as data scientists, there's a number of different names for this, even as a researcher who works with data, even if you're not a data scientist, you still need to tidy the data to do useful analyses on it. And so in today's workshop, we're going to be focusing on some tools that are available to you to achieve that. Why is tidy data important? There's a number of reasons other than just making it easier for your analysis. The first one here I've kind of alluded to, it makes it more efficient to do data science. And so for instance, here on the left-hand side, you have two very, I don't know how to call these little monsters, but I'm going to call just little monsters or fuzzy balls. I don't know. The left one is obviously very happy, and he has a bunch of tidy data sets, and he's able to use the same tools on each of those different data sets. Whereas the little fuzzball on the right is quite frustrated because each of his data sets have a different shape, have different idiosyncrasies, different unique features, which makes it hard to use the same set of tools. And so every single time you need to write something that's specific for that data set. And that's just, it's time consuming, it's error prone, and it's honestly just frustrating. And so you end up being like this little purple ball on the right, and you're just kind of banging your head against the wall, essentially, trying to figure out. It's also, tidy data also makes it easier for collaboration. And so I don't know about you, but when I get messy data, it's not necessarily the nicest thing in the world. And so by kind of agreeing on a simple set of conventions for organizing our data, like the ones I presented above, it allows us to not only clean up the data for more efficient data science, but allows you can send that data along to someone else and they can start using it right away. They don't have to clean it up. And then that clean data set can then be shared broadly. For instance, let's say if you publish a paper, and that then ensures that as many people as possible can use that data set, which is in line with something I truly believe in, which is open science, which is what Sage stands for and what I also stand for. Another thing is reproducibility. And so some of you might have faced messy data in the past and have resorted to fixing the data, for instance, in Excel. And this is totally fine. Some people might tell you that Excel is a bad thing, but for a lot of people, it's the tool that they know how to use. So my view is that Excel gets the job done, but there's a significant issue with using Excel. And so there's a better way, and it's that everything is done manually. And if ever you make a mistake, it's hard to go back. And so by using R, for instance, the advantage over Excel is that you can reproduce the same changes that you do to clean or tidy your data. And so this is reproducibility, so that if you do something and then say you realize that you had to do something differently, you can just rerun the code and make the tweaks and then rerun the code, and then you'll get the slightly tweaked version. Whereas if you had done things in Excel, you'd have to go back and you'd have to do everything from scratch. So unless you're lucky enough to have your Control or Command Z to undo your changes, but that's not something that's reliable. That's not something you should be relying on. So reproducibility is something I also care a lot about, because if you discover something in science and research, whether it's the natural sciences like biomedical research, or if it's the social sciences, it's of limited usefulness if you do an analysis and others can't do the analysis using the same data. If they can't come to the same conclusion as you've come with the data that you've used, it puts doubt on your discovery because they can't get to the same conclusion. So I've worked very hard during my PhD to get to a point where my entire analysis is reproducible. So for instance, my PhD thesis is actually written in our Markdown, so that all of my analyses and all of my plots is R code that gets run whenever I compile my thesis. And if ever I need to make a change, I can just recompile and my entire thesis gets regenerated from scratch. So that's kind of what this also helps achieve, is that idea of reproducibility. And R is great for this. And so in the end, tidy data for the win. And I hope that all of you can get something out of this workshop. And you'll notice that my background, make friends with tidy data. Hopefully you'll see not only the utility, but the nice thing is that this website that I've shared in I'll share it once more in the chat, which is the website I'm currently on. This website is going to stay up. And so if ever you remember learning or touching upon something during this workshop and you just can't remember exactly what's the function, you can always come back to this workshop, to this web page, the one I just posted, and review some of the stuff that's here. And then you can also go look at other documentation. And so just to kind of drive this point home by giving an actual example. So this is something I did last weekend. And this kind of, for me, is like, these skills are not only going to be useful for your research. These skills are not only useful for work. This can actually be sometimes useful for your personal stuff. So for instance, I live in Seattle, and so we have this book here, which is, it's trying to make it appear without the background. It's 100 hikes in a region in Washington State. And it has a really nice tables at the very beginning of the book. It's hard to make it appear. No, I can't make it appear with the Zoom background. Okay, there it is. So it has this really nice tables at the very beginning. And I want to make a tidy table out of it so that I could track the hikes that I do as I do them. And so I had something that looked like this on the left-hand side. This is what the table looks like. And there's actually a few pages. This is just the first one. And I was able to extract a CSV file from this table, which looked like this. And if you'll notice, some of you might notice that this CSV file is actually not very tidy. So for instance, we have these subtitles like Olympic Peninsula and Pacific Coast. And that's not a column really, it's a row, but it's describing everything that's below it. And there's a few other things. So for instance, if you look in the distance column, the first row is 10.6 miles, but the second row is 17.5 miles one way. And so it's kind of messy in that some values are round trips and some values are one way. And so I wanted to create something where it was tidy, and so that everything was I can at least filter, for instance, based on the season, filter based on the notes. So for instance, if I wanted a dog-friendly hike, I wanted to be able to filter based on that using the notes on the right-hand column. And so I was actually able to write up a script. And I'll just quickly show you. We're going to actually go through most of these tools today in today's workshop. But I have this script that I wrote, and you can see it's not that long. And I was able to then create this really nice organized table of that table. This is a tidy version. Here you see the region is now, instead of being a header, it's now in a column called region, and that's replicated for every single row. We have the different hikes. We have our distance, and they're all, notice that the mile is not there, but I have a separate column that says whether the distance there is a round trip or a one-way. And then we have the difficulty, the season, and all the notes are there so that if ever I need to, for instance, filter for anything that's dog friendly, I can. So I just wanted to show this as a quick example of something that I actually did in real life last week, where I used the exact same skills I'm going to teach you in this workshop. And hopefully by the end of this workshop, you will either know or you have at least a reference to go back to in order to essentially achieve what I was able to achieve here by tidying up this data set, in this case of something like hikes in Washington, but this can be anything. So make sure that if you have any questions, post them in the chat. But I think now it's time to actually get our hands dirty. I'm going to go ahead and switch back to our workshop. So again, please go ahead and open the link I posted in the chat, the shinyapps.io. And just before jumping into actually code, I want to introduce our data set that we'll be using today. And today we're going to be dealing with messy penguins. More specifically, it's a data set about penguins that is messy. And we'll open quickly the data set on GitHub just so you can see what it looks like. So this is what it looks like. We have a bunch of rows. Each row corresponds to a penguin. So in that respect, this data set is tidy. But a lot of the values are not tidy. So for instance, here, the third column, you can see that we have the species, but the value is only at the top. And if you scroll down, you eventually see a second species here, and it's also only at the top. And so essentially what it's doing, and this is something that happens very commonly in Excel, is that people as a shortcut only put the value in the first row, but they essentially assume that every row underneath it inherits that same value. And so this is something we would have to fix in in R. And we have a very similar thing here with the island. We have issues, as we'll see, as missing values. And so we're going to essentially, today's workshop is going to be us tackling this messy data set and making it tidy by introducing a number of different tools. And so today, I want to make it clear that this data set is actually originally very tidy. This is something that's published. You can download it as an R package. And I specifically messed it up for this workshop. So please blame me, not the creators of this data set, for it being messy. I intentionally messed it up for the purposes of this workshop. And here are the three penguins that we're going to be dealing with: chinstrap penguins, Gentoo penguins, and Adélie penguins. So these are the three species that we're dealing with in this data set. And not that it matters, but I like penguins. They're adorable. So I thought I would include an image of them here. All right. So the first exercise we're going to go through together, and then other exercises we're going to go through. We're going to sometimes break out and have you tackle it together, or together or individually, just to kind of get your hands dirty, so that it's not just me monologuing the entire workshop, because that would be boring. So the first thing we're going to do is make sure that the column names are tidy. And having tidy column names is really useful because it makes it easy to use them in R. And in general, it makes, by having all your column names be consistent, it just makes your life a lot easier whenever you're dealing with them. And so we're going to actually use a function from the package called janitor that allows you to clean up the names very easily. And so here, the layout of these exercises are as follows. I'm going to state an objective. And so here, the objective is to tidy the column names of the penguins data frames by eliminating white space and special characters from the column names. Now, in this case, I kind of give you a hint in the image here. But below each of these exercises, I have these hints. There's only one, but in some other exercises, there could be 2, 3, or more. And so if you don't know what to do, I suggest you expand this hint. and look at the hints and do them one at a time. Do hint number 1, see if that's enough. If that's not enough, look at hint number 2 if there's one, so on. And so for instance, I'm going to go straight to the hint. And here it tells you, you might want to check out the janitor clean names function. And so that's just to tell you, this is the function you might want to try and use in order to tackle this problem. And notice that this is blue, and so it's a link, so you can open up, and I've essentially opened it up so that the documentation can be opened alongside. So I'm actually going to arrange my screen so that the documentation is alongside my lesson. And so here we have this clean names object. And for those of you, I'm going to take a moment here because, again, some of you haven't seen our documentation before. And so I think I'll just take a moment to kind of go over the general structure of our documentation. And so in this case, we're looking at this clean names function. And so oftentimes what you'll see is the title, and then there's usually a description, usage, the arguments. Then down below, there's other stuff, including details, value, which is what it gives back to you, and examples. Now, reading all of this I don't even bother because I'm a lazy person. I admit it readily. And so what I usually do is whenever I want to look up the help of a function, I usually just go straight to the bottom for the examples to see if there are any. Because for me, examples are the easiest, for me, the quickest way to learn how to use a function. And so here I would go all the way to the bottom, look at these examples. And for instance, this is an easy example. What it's saying is that if you have a data frame, you just give it the data frame as the first argument, and that's it. Here it's giving, I don't know why that's showing up. Here it's giving an example where you use a pipe. And so that's actually what we're going to be using today, is we're going to use the pipe operator in order to essentially build up a pipeline of the different steps that we need to do to our data set in order to clean it up. And so I'm going to just copy paste this here. Whoops. So I've written the code. I could have done it manually. So I'm going to go ahead and do it manually as well, just to show that you don't necessarily need to copy paste. And then I'll use the clean names function. And you'll notice here that the clean names function comes up, and that's because behind the scenes, I've already loaded the janitor package. So I'm going to go ahead and autocomplete that. And then I'm going to click this blue button at the top right, run code. And what you will have seen is, and I should have run this beforehand, I'm going to go ahead and, remove this, run it again, and then paste it. And before running, I want you to look at this output here. So as you see, these column names are a bit all over the place. So for instance, here you have study name, which has a lowercase s and a no space and an uppercase n. We have a clutch completion, which both have capital letters, and there's a space. There's parentheses, which are very annoying to handle when they're in column names, and so on. So this is the kinds of issues that we want to address when we fix the case. And so if I go ahead and run my code, you can compare what it looks like now. And what you see is now if there was a space, it's a underscore. If there wasn't a space, but there was an uppercase letter, that's now become an underscore so that the words are separated. All of the parentheses have been removed and again, separated using underscores. And so what we have here is a very consistently named set of column names. And just for you, for the future, if ever you're wondering how to do something and you come back to this this web page, I've actually included the solution for every single one of these exercises. So if you look here at the very top, there's this start over button, which you can click to essentially go back to what it was initially. But there's also this solution button that you can click, and it pops up the actual solution that you need to run in order to achieve the objective. Now, for the purposes of this workshop, this should be a last resort if ever you're struggling. This is mostly meant so that if ever you come back to this, the solution is always there for you to kind of rely on if you're wondering exactly how to do something. But for today's workshop, what we're going to do is we're going to try and go through these and address these exercises by only using the hints. So what we're going to do now is we're going to actually put raising our hands to practice. So what I'm going to have you do is I want you to tackle this second exercise over the course of, let's say, a few minutes. And once you've completed the objective, raise your hand, and that's going to indicate to me, that you were able to achieve the objective. So go ahead and try and tackle exercise number 2. If you are not on this page, I'll post the link again in the chat. Go ahead and open this URL. This is under the tidying column names. Actually, I'm going to specifically copy this URL because this should take you straight to this page. I'm going to go ahead and, I can't do that. Use this instead. So if you open that URL, it should take you to this page. And so go ahead and continue to this second exercise and complete it. If you're wondering, if you don't know what to do, if you don't know how to proceed, go ahead and expand this first hint and see if that helps. If that isn't enough, go ahead and expand the second hint. And in a few minutes, once in like maybe 2-3 minutes, once everyone has either raised their hands or not, I'll go ahead and proceed. And yes, please, if you have any questions, if you're running into any technical issues with using this website, please let us know. I was able to use it in another workshop a few months ago, so it should work, but technology has a way of always surprising us. So please go ahead, feel free to post any questions in the chat. So once you are able to achieve this column, this objective, go ahead and raise your hand using the feature in Zoom. For those of you who joined recently, I'm referring to, if you are in Zoom and you click the reactions button at the very bottom, there's a raise hand option if you have a recent enough version of Zoom, the app. So I'm seeing I see a first raised hand. If ever, and it would be, if you use, instead of using the thumbs up, try and use the raised hand, because the raised hand will stay longer on the screen. Thank you, that's perfect. So go ahead and raise your hand once you've accomplished it. I see 2 raised hands. And if you have any questions, for those of you who are struggling to find a second exercise, at the very bottom, if you open the link, at the very bottom, there's a continue button. And that's going to open the second exercise. Does anyone get often disconnected from the server, or is it just me? If you're disconnected from the server, it might be because you weren't in the app for a while. I think if you're not using it for a certain amount of time, it might be it disconnects. Bear with me as I look at the what's going on behind the scenes. Okay, so multiple people are getting disconnected. Let me see if we're...
Is it a technical issue or something else?
I'm thinking it's a technical issue on the back end. It might be that there are a lot of people that are connected, and it's not struggling with it.
Okay, so if it's technical, we can move on.
It might be something on the server. That's why I'm just going to take a moment just to see if there's anything I can do quickly to address it. But let me see.
All right, take your time.
Okay, there's multiple people who are struggling. Okay, stay connected. This is telling me that it's an issue on the server, not. Okay, so let me try something. Maybe because there's a lot of people who are using it right now, but I didn't run into this issue last time. Okay, so could some people use, see if this URL works better? I don't expect it to, but it's essentially the exact same. It's just the exact same page, except for the acknowledgements are slightly different. So okay, I'm going to go ahead and proceed with at least giving you the solution. I'm going to take a break relatively early and see if I can address the issue so that everyone else can start coding along with us. So I'm just going to go ahead and I'll try and look into the issue afterwards. Okay, so to address this question, if ever, so I'm going to, as a general rule of thumb, if you're trying to tweak the behavior or change the behavior of a function, which in this case, we're looking at the clean names function, it's doing something, it's fixing the call names. And so in this case, we want to change its behavior so that in this specific case, we're trying to have it change the case. So that's something, instead of being snake case or camel case or kebab case where you have dashes in between, we're going to go ahead and try and change the case to something like camel case, where the words are not separated by underscores, and instead the first letter of each word, except for the first letter, is an uppercase. So that's what you would use. And the advantage of this is that you end up with shorter column names because you don't have underscores in them. So the general rule of thumb is if you want to change the behavior of a function, you want to go ahead and look at the arguments of that function in the help page. So here I still have the help page of clean names open on the right-hand side. And what you can do is scroll down to the arguments section and just go ahead and read through the arguments, and I'll give you an idea of what you can do. And my objective specifically here has to do with case. So in this case, what you could have done is open the help page and then just using your regular browser search, and you can do this in RStudio as well. You can search for case, and that might tell you exactly what you can do. And so here I get a hint in the description that capitalization preferences and go ahead and click here. Sorry, this is actually from another package. I think this is the right one. And here you have the full list of the number of the cases that you can set. And so here what we have is snake case, and you have a bunch of other ones. And then what we're going to use is going to be small camel. And just to kind of show you what you can do. And so here, what you would do is you would then go into your function, write the argument name equals, in this case, we specify the small camel value, in this case in quotes because it's a character or a string. And if I go ahead and run that code, you can see that the call names go from being a camel case to being, I think, reload. Okay. while this is happening, I'm going to have to try and set things up locally so I can still get my workshop. Sorry, I'm now running into the issue that others are running into. So I'm going to set up this workshop so I can run it locally. Sorry about that. I thought I specifically made sure there was enough servers to handle the load today. For this technical issue. Okay. Whoops. So over. I'm going to go ahead and wrap this section, and I think we'll take a. Actually, what we'll do is we'll take a break now, a 10-minute break, so I can try and fix the issues that others can follow. I don't know if that's okay for the organizers, if we can take a 10-minute break, and people can also take file breaks if need be.
All right, no issue. We have 10 minutes break for all.
All right. So yeah, be back in 10 minutes. I'm going to try and fix the issue in the meantime. So bear with me as I figure this out. Thank you.
All right. Thank you for your.
All right, as people are coming back from our break, in the meantime, could people who are here try and load the URL I just posted and then report back if you're able, if you're facing issues, or if you're having a better or worse experience. I changed a few things on the server and hoping that that would help everyone with their connection issues. Slowly loading. All right, so slowly loading and then disconnected before it finished loading. Looks fine now. Still working well. For the one who disconnected, could you try just reloading again? See if it was a one-time issue. Okay. Yeah. Yep. Okay. So for those of you who can connect, that's great. For those of you who still have connection issues, I'm sorry. I thought that this was going to, I made sure to add extra servers, but I think there's just a lot of people trying to use it at the same time, and I guess that's running into problems. So the good news is you'll be able to access this website afterwards. So this is not something, if you just follow along, I think that's going to be sufficient with at least becoming aware of these tools that are available to you. So, all right. So because actually, just as a good sense, instead of using the raise hand feature, if people can react with the thumbs up, thumbs down, depending on whether they're able to connect to that URL, that would kind of give me a good sense if 90% of the people are able to connect, then that would be very valuable information for me. So if you can just respond with thumbs up, thumbs down, if you're able to now connect to that URL. And if you're not able to give a thumbs down, this is, again, using the reactions in the Zoom window at the very bottom on the same row as the mute, unmute button. All right, I'm seeing a bunch of thumbs up. Okay, that's reassuring. I'm sorry, if anyone is unable to disconnect, although so far I haven't seen a thumbs down. We're going to proceed. I might be going a bit faster, maybe to get through a lot of these sections. I'm going to do the next few sections more as just showing you how to do it. And then if we have time towards the end, we're going to spend the last few sections to as a more hands-on, because I just want to do a bit of catch up here. So I hope that's okay with everyone. So in this section, we're looking at reordering columns. And so this is a very simple thing that can do, and it's honestly, this actually is not required strictly for tidy data. This is more of this is a nice thing for you, the human, to know. The computer doesn't really care about the column names as long as you use the column names whenever you're trying to extract a value as opposed to numbers. And so that's a general rule of thumb. If you're using any kind of data manipulation, it is always better to use the column name as opposed to their positions, because the columns can get moved around. And so here's an example of where you can move them yourself to create an order that makes more sense. So here's an example here where we have our columns. and we have all these study names, these columns: study name, sample number, species, region, etc. But there's this column here that's called nickname. And so each penguin in this data set has a nickname. And so this is something that, like, let's all imagine we're all penguin researchers, and we've grown very fond of our penguins, and we know them primarily based on their nickname, not based on their scientific ID. So this is something that for us, the human, it would be nice if the nickname was at the very left of our data set, so that whenever we're exploring it, we don't need to, we can quickly remember what penguin is being referred to in each row. And so in this case, there's a number of different ways of doing it. Some of you might be familiar with this select function as a way to reorder columns. But in this case, we're going to specifically use the function that's actually mentioned in this image at the top, which is called relocate. And this is actually a relatively new function. If you, I should have specified this at the very beginning, and this is my bad for not. Actually, no, sorry. It doesn't matter because you're using the website. But if you are using this locally, you need to have dplyr 1.0 at least, which was released a few months ago. But if you've installed dplyr a while ago, you're going to need to update it to the latest version in order to access this relocate function. But just to kind of give an example, this is how it's currently done. And I'm going to open the help page because go ahead and put it here. I'm going to open this help page here just to kind of, again, demonstrate what I would do if I were trying to figure out how to use this function. I know it exists. Now I need to actually know how to use it. So in this case, I'm going to add an extra element, another line in our pipe. I'm going to start with this, and I can see that it automatically suggests relocate. And now I'm going to use the right-hand side to kind of get a sense to how to use this function. And I'm going to use the same method as before. I'm just going to scroll at the very bottom and look at these examples. I'm going to just look at the first example, which is usually the simplest one. And here what they're doing is we have a data frame. In this case, it's called a tibble, but for us, just think of it as a data frame. And it just has 6 columns A, B, C, D, E, and F. And they have different values in them. But what you'll see here is by saying relocate F, we place the column F at the very beginning of this data frame, as opposed to being A, B, C, D, E, F. It's F, A, B, C, D, E. And so in this case, we can see very simply that if I want to take a column and move it at the very beginning of the data frame, I just need to give the column name in relocate. So in this case, I just want to use nickname. And if I go ahead and run my code, you'll notice that now nickname is at the very beginning of my data frame. If I actually want to see what this looks like, I can do head tidy penguins, run this again. And you can see here that the nickname is at the very beginning of this data frame. So my first penguin here is called Camille, then it's Dixie, Adrian, Alexander, etc. And so now we have this nice data frame that looks what we would like. This is more to make it friendly for you, the human. Now, if you go to the second exercise, and I'm going to do this together. I'm going to do this for you just so that we can do a bit of catch up here. Upon closer inspection, you notice that there are 3 penguins named Carla. Hence, you realize that the sample number is actually a better identifier because it's guaranteed to be unique. And in general, it's really good to have unique identifiers. And so here the nickname is useful, but it's not ideal. And so in this case, what we would like to do is to place the nickname column after the sample number column. So here you notice how we have nickname, study name, and then sample number. And so in this case, what we would like to do is specifically also move this nickname column after the sample number column. I'm just going to, I see a question in the chat. If I have 2 data frames and have the same column names, but in different order, how can I order the columns in both data frames to be the same? I assume I have many columns, like 100, so I kind of write the column names one by one. That's actually a great question. Maybe we'll see if we can do it later to try and as an example. So I'll do this after I'm done this exercise. So here, what we would do is we would again go back to our relocate documentation, and in this case, again, what we're doing is trying to change the behavior of the relocate function. And to do that, we look at the arguments. So if I look at the arguments here, luckily the relocate function is quite simple. And so what we can see here is that we have a before and after argument, or specifically dot before and dot after. And it says supplying neither will move the columns to the left hand side, specifying both is an error. And so basically it's telling you where to put the column. And so that's exactly what we want to do. We want to essentially place the nickname column after the sample number column. And so if I go ahead and run this code, what you see now is we have our first three columns is study name, sample number, and then nickname. And that's exactly what we want to do. All right. Now, I think I have one more exercise here. No, this is missing values. So actually, before moving on to the other exercise, I'm going to take a moment to address the question in the chat because I think it's a very good question. So, and I'm going to switch to RStudio just because it's a bit more flexible than here. So I'm going to, let's see. And for those of you, I'm going to post this in the chat as a solution. But let's imagine you have, I think, so here I have, this is the actual tidy version of this data set. So here we have 8 columns. And so I'm going to assign this version to a variable called P1 for penguins 1. Then I'm going to actually shuffle these columns. And for this, I'm going to assign this to P2. And I'm going to use, you do not need to worry about how I'm shuffling the columns. Let's see. So here what I'm doing is I'm shuffling the columns. If I look at P2, you can notice that the columns are out of order. So what if I want to make one? I want to make sure that, let's say I want to make sure that P1 is the same order as P2. And so one way you can do it is essentially extract the columns from the one that you want to reorder using the column names of the one you don't want to reorder. And so I'm going to, just for the sake of argument, let's say that one of the data frames doesn't have all the column names of the others. So you can't just use the column names. You actually have to just make sure that everything else is there. So what you can do here is I would say, let's say P2 has an extra column called foobar. And this is really, and this has the number 100. So here I added this extra column here so that P2 has extra columns that aren't in P1. If I want to reorder P1, what you could do is you do P1. Here I'm going to use my pipe operator, and you can use the select operator. And when you do select, I'm trying to think of the best way of doing this. So, okay, so one of the easiest way of getting the exact same order is if you do something like this where you're taking P1 and you're using the column names of P2. Except when you do this, what happens is the foobar column doesn't exist in P1. And so there is a way of doing this, and I'm realizing now this is a bit more complicated than I was anticipating. So I'm going to leave this till the end of the workshop because I want to go back to the part that I know the answers to. If I don't have time by the end of the workshop, I will send an email out to the registrants with the solution to this problem because I think it's an important one to tackle. And I've done this before. I'm just not good at improvising on the spot because I don't have the data sets prepared. But thank you for that question. All right, so the next question that we have here, the exercise is filling in missing values. And so here what we have is a data set, and I actually kind of demoed this earlier. So if you look at the data set, we have this column species where only the first value of all of those rows that are from that same species is filled in. And like I said earlier, this is a common thing that happens in Excel whenever they are, whenever you're trying to take a shorthand or shortcut in annotating your rows. And so in this case, what we'll do is we want to fix the missing values in the species column. And here you can see how I have the same thing here. If I click next a bunch of time to go down to the different rows, eventually I'll have the second species, again 2. And if I do it again and I go down a bunch of rows again, I'll have eventually the chin strap. So there's 3 species. And so there are 3 rows. And essentially what we want to do is I want to fill in the missing values with the value that's above. And so here, if you look at the hint, it points you to the fill function, which I'm going to open here on the side. And again, same thing. I'm going to just scroll to the very bottom and look at what an example looks like. And so here we create this example data frame where we have this, in this case, these are sale numbers. And what we have is the year, where it's 2000, 2001, 2002, and 2004. And just by eye, it's very clear that these NAs are supposed to be 2000, and these NAs are supposed to be 2001. And remember, if you want tidy data, you need a single value per cell. In other words, like per intersection between a row and a column. And so these NAs, they're supposed to be 2001, but they're not. And so in order to do that, we can use the fill function. And so here, if I scroll down to the example, here we just pipe the data frame to fill. And in this case, you just specify the column that you wish to fix using the fill function. And so here, if I build on top of what we already have, I just need to do fill. In this case, I specify the column, which is species. And if I run this code, now all of our NA values are gone, because what the fill function did is it took the first value, and if there are any values NA underneath, it took it and it used it over and over again to fill in the blanks. So this is a very powerful function, and this actually was one of the functions I used when I was tidying my hiking data that I presented earlier. So as another way of dealing, another example of using this function is we have a column called island. And it has a very similar thing, but there's an error. There's an issue here. The first column doesn't have any value, but the first row doesn't have a value, but this third row has value. So what do you do with the first rows? If I were to use fill species, if I were to use fill species, and then and let's say in a separate, I do fill, in this case, island, it gets me there for the most part, but it doesn't actually quite do all what we want, because there's these two first rows that have no data still. And if I go through next and I go through, and you can see here that all the other values, even at the very end of this data frame, are all filled in. It's just these 2 first rows that aren't. So let's say you go back to the researcher who gave you this data set and ask them, what's up with this? And they say, oh, actually, that's an issue, that's an error. Those 2 first rows are actually the same island as the third one. So it's supposed to be Torgerson. So you can do one of 2 ways. You can go in the data set and manually move it, but that's not reproducible, because if you do it manually, there's no way for you to reproduce it. In this case, there's a way of doing it using the same fill function. And I see someone suggesting arrange rows and fill. That's actually a very clever idea. And so that's something that you could do, where you just take the third row and move it up. So that's one way that actually would work. And that's a nice, good example of how there are multiple ways of addressing the same issue. I'm going to show you an example that I find a bit more elegant, and that's subjective, and you might prefer to rearrange the rows. But there's actually, when you look at the if you look at the fill function, there's an argument called direction. by default, it's down. And that's exactly what we saw here. So the values that appeared, the missing values below it were filled in, but not the ones above. You can do it up, reverse, but there's also these other two that are useful, which is down, then up, and then up, and then down. And in this case, if we were to set the direction to down and then up, it actually achieves what we want to do, because what it'll do is it'll do the first step, which we already did, and then it's going to fill in those two first rows at the very end once everything else is filled in. So this is a shorthand to achieve that, but I like the suggestion from the chat of rearranging the rows. I think that's a total valid step. I think the only issue is that it would probably take 2 or 3 lines to do that as opposed to this 1 line. And I'm not saying that this version is better, it's simply shorter. And part of this workshop is to give you these tools so you can achieve more with less code, because the less code you write, the less bugs that you end up facing. All right, so we now have a nice, clean way of fixing our island issue. We're going to go on and handle a few dates. And dates are notoriously annoying to deal with. Luckily, there's a function called lubridate. So I think it's technically part of the tidyverse, but it's not loaded by default. I've pasted the name of the package in the chat. But the lubridate package is a very useful package for handling any sorts of dates. And so here what we have is we have a column called date egg. And what you'll notice is that it's actually a character. It's not a date. So date is an object in R, but in this case, it's stuck as a character. So the objective here is to fix the date egg column in place. So don't create a new column, so that the values are stored as dates rather than characters. So if you want to edit a column, whether it's adding a new column or overriding an existing column, and thank you for posting the link to the lubridate documentation. That's actually great. You use the mutate function. And so for those of you who haven't used dplyr, the mutate function, the way it works is you specify the new column name, and then you do some operation like, I don't know, some function, and then you use and then you provide some existing column 1 and existing column 2. So this is the general structure of mutate. But in this case, what we want to do is we want to take our existing column, which is date egg, and we want to do some function that takes the date egg and fixes it and actually converts it into an actual date. And so here, we're going to, again, for the sake of efficiency, to catch up a bit, because we have a bit less than an hour. I think we do have less than an hour. Yes, 10:45 for my local time. So we're going to go through this, and we're going to remain hands off for now. And so here we want to use the mutate. And specifically, there's a function called YMD and other groups of functions. And so I'm going to go ahead and open this in the documentation. And there's actually a number of functions in this group. So we have YMD, YDM, MDY. And for those of you who aren't aware, YMD is referring to the year, the month, and the day. And it's actually highlighted here in the title. And so if you go, again, every single time I open these pages, I just go to the bottom because I'm a lazy person. I don't want to read all of this. So I go to the very bottom to see what these functions are actually used for. So here we have a vector consisting of these dates. And as you'll notice, that these dates are a bit, they're formatted in a way where it's actually not unambiguous what the order is. So 09, 01, 01. It could be year, month, day. It can year, day, month. It could be month, day, year. It could be any of these, because all of these numbers are below 12, right? So it doesn't really help you to actually assign which order it is. And so this is where you as an analyst need to confirm what the dates are, what the format is. So you can, let's say, go back to your researcher friend and ask them, what is the format of these dates? And so, and then let's say they tell you, actually, these dates are formatted using the month, day, year format. And so some of you might recognize this format where you have month, day, year. It's a very common format for American researchers. And so that's just something that you need to, it's good to be aware of. And so this function then, if I'm looking at the format month, day, year, that corresponds to the function MDY. And so if I go ahead and replace this function with MDY and give that a run, notice how now I'm facing with dates instead of string characters. And now they're nicely formatted as this year, month, day. And I'll just take a quick moment, get on my soapbox and start preaching this format. If ever you write dates anywhere, whether it's in Excel, in a plain text, in Word documents, anywhere, I highly advocate that you use this format, year, month, day. First of all, it's an international standard. It's called ISO 8601. This is a standard around dates and times. And there's even a nice comic here, one of the first results, where it's saying you should be using this date format and nothing else because it is standard. And if ever I see 4 digits, then 2 digits, then 2 digits, it's easy for me to assume that it's year, month, day. The nice thing about this format is that if you use it in, let's say, file names at the beginning of your file names, whenever you sort your file names, they're actually going to naturally sort chronologically. And I think that reason alone is why I use it. So actually, just as a quick example, I have a set of folders here, and I use this date format, year, day, month, year, month, day. And when I sort by name, they're sorted by date. So anything that I want to do, I can know when I did it. So that's a big plug of using this specific date format. That's just an aside. And I think it's a general good way of staying consistent with your tidy data. All right, so that's handling a bit of dates. We're going to look at another thing here, where we want to create a new column called year egg that only contains the year as a plain numeric column. So right now we have our date egg that looks like a date, but let's say we want a specific column that's just the year, because sometimes we want to filter for the experiments that were done in a very specific year. So as we saw in the previous example, if you want to add a new column, you need to use the mutate function. And in this, I can actually use the same mutate function. I don't need to add a new mutate call by using essentially a second argument. And in this case, I'm going to call the column name year egg. And if you look at the hint, it gives you a reference to a group of functions called year. So I'm going to go ahead and open that on my right-hand side. And we actually have a few functions here where if you use, and again, scrolling to the bottom, if we have a date that is year, in this case, it's March 26, 2012. If you run the year function on it, it returns just the year. Pretty self-explanatory. So all I need to do here is use the year function and run that on my date object. In this case, it's stored in date egg. If I go ahead and rerun this, uh-oh, I hope it didn't crash the server. The server might have crashed. I just refresh this page. Okay, it's taking a while to load. Seems like the server's running into issues again. I'm going to revert back to my local version just for this. All right, so if I go ahead and run this and I run the code, you can see here that the output is a numeric column that only consists of the year component of the date. So there's actually a bunch of these functions. There's year, day, month. Even here, if you look here, there's actually ISO year, EP year, and these are just other ways of considering the year. So just as an FYI. All right, so if we continue, we have our third objective here. Notice that the year A column was added at the end of the data frame. So if you look here at the column names, you see that the year A, because of the way mutate works, it actually automatically adds new columns at the end of the data frame. And in this case, it would be nice if the year column was next to the date column. And so based on what you already know, you would be tempted to do something like this, right? So we go ahead and use relocate, and then we relocate year egg, and then we would say after date egg. This is something we've already seen. And if we ran this, you would see that it actually worked. But again, driving home the point that each of these things that we need to do have multiple ways of getting them done, there's actually another way that I'll introduce you today. And that's if you look at the mutate documentation, you can notice that there is this before and after arguments. And that's because this is also recent. You need the most recent version of dplyr. But essentially, you can do what relocate is doing here, but you don't need to do it in a separate function call. So I can just, instead of having this extra line here, I don't need to call an extra function. I just need to set a new argument called after date egg within mutate. And if you look at if I rerun this, the output looks exactly the same. So this again shows that there are multiple ways of achieving the same thing. In this case, the length is about the same. The advantage is I avoid having to call yet another function, which is slightly less efficient. So this is a bit more efficient to do it this way. How does R know which field the after refers to? Just to clarify the question, are you referring whether it knows whether it's using the after from mutate versus the after from relocate? Just to clarify the question, or are you referring to how to know which column to use? I'm gonna just take a sip of water in the meantime. That's a great question. So yeah, so how does mutate know which column to actually place after date egg? And actually what it does is it applies to all of them. So in this case, I'm kind of cheating because here I'm tweaking the date egg. And essentially what's happening is that it's placing the date egg after the date egg, which actually doesn't change anything. So that's actually happening, but it doesn't result in any changes. And then it takes the year egg and places it after date egg, and that actually has an effect. So to answer your question, R just does, well, dplyr, the mutate function, applies it to all of the new columns that you create. So if I were to, for instance, create a new column, let's say it's called foobar, and I'm going to equal to 100, and I run this, you'll notice that foobar is after date egg, and then year egg is after that. So hopefully that example clarifies what R is doing behind the scenes. That's a great question. So I really appreciate you asking that. So I'm going to go back to our version without foobar. All right, now we're at extracting numbers from text. And I think this is the last section that we're going to do. I'm going to give an example, and then after this, we'll have 45 minutes left. We're going to return to doing things a bit more hands-on, just so that you have a bit more fun typing the text. Again, I'm hoping that the workshop is working. Mine kind of timed out a bit. So here, the little comic here, the little drawing at the beginning hints at this function from the readr package. So just for clarification, the readr package, the dplyr package, the tidyr package, all of these packages are part of the tidyverse. And so if you were to just do, I'm going to post this in the chat. If you were to simply do just library tidyverse at the beginning of your script, you'd be loading most of these functions. just with that one command. So in this case, we're using the readr package, which is typically used for reading in files or writing them out. But there's this really nice function within it called parse_number. And I think this comic does a great job at explaining what it does. So here what we have is this, this cute data frame, which is on a cinema billboard. And there's just 2 rows and 2 columns. And what they're doing is they're specifically creating a column where all of the other stuff that isn't a number is removed. And this doesn't necessarily assume an integer. If you have a decimal number, like the 12.75 here, it keeps everything, the entire decimal number. But in this case, it removed the $ in front and the USD after it. So if ever you end up with a column that includes a number, just as an example, my hiking example, you know that we had this, for some of you might have joined late, so I'm going to just show you this. This is a table that I actually extracted in order to create a nice tidy version of this table. This is just a list of hikes that exist in Washington State in the US. Notice here how this distance column has the distance and then miles or miles one way. I actually use this function in order to extract just the number from this column. So I actually use this exact same function for this purpose. So this is not something that's theoretical. I actually used it just the other day for a personal task. So if we go back to our example here, if you look at our body mass column, it's pretty messy. It's actually worse than my issue with the miles, because we have some of them that are space G. Some of them is just the G with no space. Some of them, they didn't even bother specifying the units. Yet another situation, they even spelled out grams the word. So it's not as if you can go in and just trim the G or the grams, because the researcher who put in this data wasn't consistent. And so this is where this parse number function is very useful, because it just doesn't matter. Just if there's a number in there, just take it out, extract it, and then you can decide whether you want to put it in a separate column or if you want to just replace the existing column with that value. And so here, what it's saying here is to take the body mass column and update it in place. Don't create a new column that only has the number and no units. And so that's what I'm going to do here is I'm going to create now a separate mutate. And if you're wondering why I'm using a separate mutate instead of adding to this one, is because in this specific case, and this comes back to the question that was asked in chat a few minutes ago, I don't want the body mass column to be moved to after date egg. So that's why I'm creating a separate mutate so that it gets, in this case, it's just going to not get moved if I update an existing column. So here I'm going to take the body mass column, and I'm going to use the parse number. And actually, there's a bunch of them, but I'm only interested in the parse number. But notice how, actually, I'm going to just take a moment and stop. There's a few of these here. You have parse date. There's also parse integer. So if you actually are only looking for integers, that might be a way to go back. But here I'm going to go parse number. And I'm actually going to basically run this function on this column. And I'm going to take the output and store it back into the column. So here I'm going to get rid of all my different units in different, whatever form they take. So if I go ahead and run this, what we have as the output is a very clean numeric column, not a character column, that I can do mathematical operations on that only consists of the numbers. So this is exactly what we want. This is perfect. Now, if we go to our next exercise, what if some units were not grams? That's actually a great question. And I think that some of my, I think the creating multiple categories we're going to see a function there that I think would help you address that problem. If ever you have to detect whether or not it's a gram, or let's say some of them are in grams, some of them are in kilograms, you would then have to conditionally check if the unit is, let's say, a G or a kg, and then do the operations differently. So that's a very good point. And I think that some of the one function that we'll see later will help you address that exact point. So very, very good question. So yes, if you know regular expressions, you can use them in this specific scenario. Absolutely. For those of you who don't know regular expressions, that's a relatively advanced topic. We won't cover them today, but yes, to answer your question, they could be used here. So now our next objective is to tidy the body mass column once again, but change the body mass column name to indicate the units. So here we're lucky because all of the units are in grams. In other words, there shouldn't be a body mass column. You only want a body mass _G column. So just to clarify, because since you remove the units from within the column, because you only want numbers, now we're moving that information to the column name so you don't lose it. And so here we have body mass _G. And while you're at it, make sure that the new body mass G column isn't moved to the end of the data frame using what you've learned so far. Okay, so actually, I'm going to make this an exercise that everyone can try and do. So everyone, if you aren't on this exercise number 2, from the extracting number from text, please go ahead and go there. I'm going to post a link. Does this link take people there directly? I'm going to see. Not sure. Yeah, I'm having issues connecting. I don't know if other people are also having issues. Also, I'm seeing very few connections on the. Yeah, there aren't as many connections. Are people using the other link I posted? Yeah. So if you're following along at home, I can't open the link, but go ahead and visit the extracting numbers from text section on the left. And then go to the exercise number 2. If ever you just click on this and you scroll to the bottom, there's going to be a continue button to open up exercise number 2. And go ahead and try and use what we've learned so far, which is looking up the documentation of the functions that are at play. And actually, for you, I have the mutate documentation open here on the right. I'm going to go ahead and post this link in the chat and try and tackle this objective. Once you've tackled this objective, go ahead and raise your hand just to indicate to us that you've completed the exercise. If you have trouble completing the exercise because your connection is disconnected, then there's not much I can do. I'll try and see if I can post another way where you can get these up and running on your local machine, but I think that would be a bit too much work, sadly. So, so for those of you who have connections, which I hope, I saw a bunch of thumbs up earlier, I hope that's still the case. Go ahead and try exercise 2 here. And once you've completed it, once you've achieved it, go ahead and raise your hand using the raise hand function in Zoom. Can I raise my hand as a demonstration? I don't think I can, so. For those of you who are stuck, I suggest you check out the hints that are below the exercise. They'll point you in the right direction. And feel free to experiment. Once you have a thing that you want to try out, just click run code and see what the output looks like. I think this is a good time to point out that there are over 30 people on this call. There's probably a dozen ways of doing this. So the goal here is not to have everyone have the same answer, is to at least achieve it. And if you can use the function that we've learned so far, but there are other ways. And if you know other functions, you can use those. You can also Google. Google is something that I use all the time. Even if I've been using R for, I don't know, I think over 5 years now, and I still Google stuff, even super basic stuff. So I could Google something like R change column name, and then I would look up what to do. If you want, you can do R tidyverse change column name, or just tidyverse change column name, and that will usually present way of doing things. So there are many ways of achieving this. All right, so it's been a few minutes. I won't linger too long. So there are a few ways of doing this. One solution that was sent to me privately on the chat was the use of this function that we haven't seen yet, but it's good to know in general. It's the rename function. And so here what you would do is you'd specify the new column name, which in this case is body mass G, and then you specify the old column name, which in this case is body mass. And then that would, in this case, well, actually, this is not the best way of doing it. What I would do is I would just look at this, run the code, and you can see here that we have our, where is it? Body mass underscore G column. So that's one way of doing this. And it's nice and simple and very readable. And I really like solutions that are readable. Just to present you an alternative, if you look at the mutate documentation, we have the, we can specify here that we want the body, we can specify the name of the column that we want to store it in. But if we do this, what you'll notice is that we have this body mass G that is added at the end, and we still have the body mass column. That's the old version that has the units in it, which isn't what we want. And so there, if you look at the mutate documentation, there's a few things that we can do. First of all, we need to fix the fact that the column is added at the end. And for that, we know what to do. We can use the .after column and say, I want you to add this new column after body mass, which is essentially where we want to be. So now we have body mass and body mass G right afterwards. But now we still need to get rid of the body mass column. And so here you can use this other argument in mutate called .keep. And then you can say, I want to keep all the columns that are unused. And so essentially, any columns that were used are going to get dropped. In this case, the only column that was used was body mass. And so if I go ahead and run this, I end up getting the same output. Now, I'm going to admit that I think the rename solution is a much cleaner solution than this, because this assumes that you have to know these extra arguments. So I'm going to go ahead and give credit to the person, Akil. I'm probably mispronouncing your name. I apologize. The credit to giving a nice, elegant solution, which is simply to rename the the column as follows. I think that this is much more readable. All right, so now I think at this point I was gonna take a break, but we took our break a bit earlier. So I'm gonna go ahead and go ahead and tackle this next problem, which is handling different NA values. So if you look in our data set, what you'll notice is that we have different columns that are supposed to be numbers, but they're not. And so I'm going to just highlight a few. Here we have different columns that have these that are supposed to be numbers. I mean, there are lengths or depths, and they're in millimeters, but they're not. But they're not integers; they're characters, and that's a problem because it means that you cannot do mathematical operations on them. And actually, in this preview here, you can see why that is, or at least one reason. You can see that at least in the depth and the flipper length column, you have the existence of these string characters. In one case, you have the dash. In the other case, you have a double dash. And these obviously aren't numbers. So we can presume that this is what the researcher was using to essentially indicate that maybe they weren't able to calculate the value. But for us, it's messing up our analysis because it's preventing these columns from just appearing as numbers. And so I'm going to go over and just kind of give you a demonstration because I want to actually go through the next section and have us work on that together. But whenever you read in a data set or whenever you convert a data set, you can actually specify which values the R should interpret as NA or as missing. And often what I think the default is to consider a blank value or the value NA as a missing value. But in this case, the researcher was using other values such as the dash and the double dash to indicate a missing value. And so this is what we want to do to try, and we want to make sure that instead of being interpreted as a dash or double dash, we want this to be interpreted as a missing value. And so for this, we're going to use, if you look at our hints, we're going to use this function called type convert, which is also from the readr package. And specifically, there's this argument called NA, which tells you what values to interpret as NA. So here I'm going to go ahead and pipe this to type convert. And I'm going to use the NA. And I'm going to use the values that are already there. So the space, the blank, then NA. And then I'm going to provide the other values that I also want to consider as NAs. So I'm going to want to consider the dash. I want to consider the double dash. And I'm going to look at my data set and see if there's anything else that looks weird. And so here, if I go to my columns here that are supposed to be numbers, we have the Coleman length, we have the flipper length, and all this. I see that there's these dashes and the double dash here. If I scroll down, I'm looking here for different values that would represent NA. So I'm not seeing any at the moment. So I'm going to go ahead and go back to my code here. And I'm going to just rerun this. So I want you to pay attention here to these columns. Right now, they're characters. Hopefully, they become numeric. So if I go ahead and rerun this, right. What we have here is, okay, so here we can see that our depth is a number, but our length is still a character. And the flipper length is also still a character. So there's something in those columns that is preventing the R from interpreting them as numbers. And so here, what we need to do is figure out exactly what is in those columns that makes up. And I think I list them here. So here there are actually different values that are used by the researchers to indicate a missing value. So there's this dash and double dash. There's also the period. There's these 3 question marks, and then there's n/a as opposed to just NA. And so I need to include all of these in my list. So I'm going to include the dots. I'm going to include the question marks. I'm also going to include the n/a. And if I go ahead and rerun this, now I see that my column length is a number. You can notice here that the numbers don't have quotes. That's another hint that it's not a string. My depth is a number. My length is a number. And here, my delta here are numbers. So everything that's supposed to be a number is a number. And that's exactly what we want. So I have a great question here. So if you have a huge data set and you cannot use inspection, kind of like what I was doing where I was manually looking through. So here's what I would probably do. Maybe one thing that you can do, especially if you're expecting numbers, is you can probably use the parse number function here. And what I think that, if I'm not mistaken, if you were to parse a number and there isn't a number in it, which is the case here with our random NA values, it would return an NA. So what you can do is, I'm going to try this very quickly. So if I were to, one could use a Unix line. Yes, so you can definitely use Unix here. For those of you who know Unix, that would be totally valid. But let's say if I were to, for a second, get rid of this, and I'm trying to figure out what those values are. Here's one way where you could do it. So here I have my tidy penguins data frame. And I'm going to specifically want to look at a column. Let's say my problematic column was the depth here. I can then subset this to the values where parse number is NA. So I'm going to try and run this and see if it actually works. I think I have a typo somewhere. Is NA, oh, I'm missing a parentheses. All right, so here's an example here where I subset this column to any values where parse number yielded a NA, meaning that there's no number in it. And so that gave me this /NA. I can do it with another column if I wanted to, if I had the flipper length, I think was one of them. If I go ahead and use that, I would then run out this, and then I would be able to find that in this column, there's the double dash and the plus, the 0. And so this is one other kind of, actually, I hadn't thought about this, but this is one way where you can actually repurpose this parse number. You don't necessarily use it as a way to extract numbers, but it's also a way to detect where there isn't a number. The suggestion in the chat about using Unix is another good one. Here, essentially, what you can do is you can actually do that command in R, for people who are more familiar with R, where you can type unique, and it will give you all the unique values that appear in that data set. Now, in the case of numeric values, it's not great because obviously if you have numbers are rarely duplicated. If it's integers, is a bit more realistic. Here, our data set isn't too big, so you can easily see by eye that we have the double dash and the period. So, but when it comes to categorical data, I think William's suggestion in a chat, or here we can do in R, where you just take the unique values, is good. And I think at the end, I just noticed it now where you can sort based on the number of cases. So in R, you can use the table function in order to count the instances of each value. So if you have a specific NA value that comes up more than once, this is another way of picking it up using this technique. So a great question on how to figure it out. Hopefully the technique I showed using parse number is something that you can use in combination with is_NA. All right, so look at the time. We have about last section we're going to tackle, and I think it covers a really important function, which is case when, case_when. And I think this also comes back to the question in the chat from earlier, which is how would you handle cases where you'd have different units? So you'd say you have units that are G and units that are kg, such as kilograms. This is probably the function I would use in order to handle that. And you can use regular expressions, as you mentioned, or you can use another tool as well. So here, this we have this example here in the comic, and I'm going to start with that because this function is a bit unusual. So some of you have probably used if-else in R, where you say if-else, and if the condition, the first argument is a condition. If that condition is true, you use the second argument. If the condition is false, you use the third argument. And so for some of you, you might have used that, and I've used it all the time. It's a very common thing. But if ever you have multiple categories and not just two, where it's one condition, let's say you have multiple conditions. So let's say, imagine you have multiple units and you have grams and kilograms. Then you can just check, is the last character a G? Or if not, yes or no. But let's say if you have grams and kilograms and ounces and stones, or like any number of units that are for measuring weight. In that case, what you can do is you can use this function case when. So here, what we have is we're using mutate, but you can focus here on the middle part. And you look at the data here on the bottom left. So here we have a very simple data frame where we have the type of, in this case, it looks like these are monsters or creatures. You have the type of creatures, which are Kraken, Dragon, Cyclops, Kraken, Dragon. Then you have the age, so whether they're baby, adult, teen, adult, teen. And then what this mutate function is doing is it's adding a new column called danger, which is the third column that's being painted here. And then what it's doing is it's determining what the danger is. And so what it's checking is like, it's basically doing a bunch of conditions one after another. And so here, if the type is Kraken, so that's this part here. I don't know if you can see my cursor, but this part here, type double equals Kraken, that's condition. If that condition is true, then, which is this tilde or the squiggly line, make the value of this column equal to extreme. Otherwise, and then it goes to the next condition. Now, in this case, this condition is just true. So anytime you reach this point, it's just always gonna then default to high. So this is a super useful situation. We're gonna go back to our code and we're gonna observe a situation where having multiple categories using case when is actually useful. So in our situation here, in a column called sex, we have different ways of expressing the biological sex of the penguin. So we have female, all caps, male, all caps. We have uppercase F, lowercase f. We have other lowercase female, lowercase male, and then M and F. So M and M. So there's so many different ways of encoding this, and that's hugely problematic for us. And so we need to essentially tidy up this column so that we only have two ways of representing, in this case, male and female. So here, what I want you to do is to tidy up the sex column such that it only contains one value per sex in addition to any NAs that are in the column. Consider adding an unknown category to catch anything that doesn't match one of your text patterns. Note that the function quiet type convert is being used here, just because it makes it so that it's not as noisy. So I'm using quiet type convert instead of just type convert. You can just ignore that. It's mostly just to prevent needless text from appearing. All right, so here you can see that we have multiple different values of our of the sex. So I want you to, I'm going to make this an exercise. So we're going to spend 5 minutes on this because I want you to practice your skills. I want you to go ahead and complete this objective. And there's 5 hints here. So I want you to try and go through and try and use the hints only if you need them, and go through each of the hints in order to address it, in order to tidy up the sex column. So go ahead and I'll give you 5 minutes. Once you've achieved that, go ahead and raise your hand in Zoom so that I know that you're done. And once everyone is there, we'll reconvene and we'll discuss the solution. So yeah, I suggest go through each of the hints and go ahead and try and tackle this by looking up and if you need to, look up the case when documentation. If I go ahead and I could try pull it up here, reference. All right, so here's the case when documentation. And I'm going to just scroll down to the example section for you because that's what I would use in practice. So I like this specific example here, I think is a good example of what you would do if you had multiple categories. So you have like different conditions, and then you have the tilde, the squiggly line, and then the value that you would want to give. So go ahead and use this to essentially convert each of these different values that are being used currently for male and female into just 2 categories, whatever you choose. It can be MF or it can be male, female, whatever you prefer. It doesn't really matter. So go ahead and tackle that, and you'll have just a few minutes. Again, once you're done, please raise your hand in Zoom so that I'm aware that you are caught up. If you have any other questions, now's a good time to ask in the chat, respond. All right, so we have just 5 minutes to the end. So I'm going to make sure we go through this exercise together, and then we'll wrap up with a few rules. We won't be able to go through everything today, but the nice thing about this workshop is that it is available online. And if you visit this page later, hopefully when it's not everyone at the same time, we'll be able to access it and without crashing. And I'm also going to make sure that there are instructions on the GitHub link, which will be shared with you after the workshop, that has the instructions on how to run this tutorial on your local computer, so that if ever you run into consistent connection issues, you can just run it locally like I am now, and that should be absolutely fine. So how I would tackle this. So there's a few things here at play. I think there was a question in the chat about this issue of like having to type all these by hand it's a pain. It's onerous. It's a lot of work, and I think it's kind of annoying to do, honestly. So there are a few things. Realistically, in practice, I don't think you would end up with like this many categories unless the data is being entered by 6 different people. But in some cases, you might end up with a lot of categories. And there are a few tricks that you can use to make your life a bit better. So for instance, in this case, one of the things that is varying is that we're changing between uppercase and lowercase. And so one trick we could use here is if we just make everything lowercase, it makes it easier for us to figure out what the different variations are. And so that's what we're going to start by doing. I'm going to say mutate. I'm going to take the sex column and I'm going to say I want everything to be lowercase. And so if you look here at the very bottom, we went from, I don't know how many, let me just quickly go back and rerun this. So we went from 8, 9, 10, 11. We went from 11 different variations to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So we got almost half of the number of variations of the different spellings of male and female. And so now the next step is to take this and then group it into 2. And I'm going to just use the spelled out version, so that's unambiguous. But here's what I would do. So now I've used that column and I've made it all lowercase. I'm going to go ahead and use it again. In order to essentially using case when in order to group my functions. So here my condition is going to be if the column sex is, I'm going to use the %in operator so that I can use multiple here. So if it is in female or if it's just an F, I want you to return the value female. And then, whoops, wrong, comma's in the wrong place. Whereas if the sex is among male, whoops, or M, I want you to return the value male. And I also want to specifically handle if it's anything else other than male, female, I want it to be labeled as unknown. So that I use a very specific use here, a specific category for the other things. So if I go ahead and run that, I end up with now 3 categories, which is much more manageable. But let's say if you were, and I realize I have 2 minutes left. If let's say we're in a situation where you had a lot more variation, like I posted in the chat, one thing you could do is maybe be a bit more relaxed and simply say, if there's an F, then it's a female. And if there's a M, or if there's an F, then it's a female. Then if there's an M, it's a male. But that you have to be very careful with those kinds of rules because sometimes it might not be always true. All right, so I'm going to skip over the sections, and for my last minute here, I'm just going to highlight that there's a number of rules here that you could follow in order to in order to follow whenever you're creating spreadsheets. And there's a nice paper here that you can follow in order to know how to organize your spreadsheets. And so on that, I just want to acknowledge the number of people like our studio and everyone who kind of contributed to this. And I hope everyone was able to learn something during this workshop. I realized I should have left 5 minutes at the end for questions. I was, I guess, answering the questions during the break while I was waiting for people to complete the exercise. But yeah, any of the illustrations here, I do want you to call out Allison Horst on Twitter is who to check out for that. The Palmer Penguins, the clean version, is available as an R package. And yeah, some of the illustrations were taken from this blog post. Google Stack Overflow, always I receive acknowledgements on my end. How I still need to use them all the time, even though I always use them. And so I really like this image here to think, whether it's the R Ladies community, the larger R Stats community, the tidyverse community. Many of these communities are super friendly and welcoming. Yeah, and I hope that you're able to continue your journey learning R, learning the tidy, and hopefully today gave you a nice introduction to the tools that are available to you. And yeah, this website is remaining one for.
All right, thank you, Dr. Bruno, for this engaging and inspiring presentation. It was really informative and innovative. I was knowing that today's topics brought up many questions, and this sounds so good. So thank you so much. It's a really interesting presentation. Big thanks also for all participants in today's workshop for their interesting questions. We look to see you again in our next meetups during this month. Stay tuned and bye-bye.
Bye, everyone. Have a great day.
Bye. Thank you so much.